he's holding a what appears to be a telex in his hand. He also is holding sunglasses in his other hand, which suggests that he had just come in from the outside and when someone handed him this telex.
Why did he put those down if he was posing for a picture? Or was it an impromptu-looking picture?
It looks like it was an impromptu type of thing. He just came in. They brought in the weather balloon. Okay, over here, General Ramey, we want a shot of you. Everything was moving quickly.
Bang, bang.
He still has his cap on, for that matter.
Yeah.
He still has his cap on. And so he's holding this telex. And, without modern computers and what have you, you couldn't read anything on that. It's just something he's holding. But with the advent of computer software, I think Don and who was the doctor?
Dr. Richard Haynes.
Richard Haynes, around in the early 90s, tried to, just by extreme magnification, try to read the memo. And I think they were able to read just a few letters or maybe a word or two, but nothing that made any sense. But with modern computers and software, we are now able to read portions of that telex that he's holding in his hand. And it's not talking about a crashed weather balloon. It's talking about a crashed disc.
That's amazing.
It also mentions the dead aliens, the cadavers that were in the wreck that was forwarded to Fort Worth Army Airfield in Texas.
And it's in his hand.
Victims of the wreck.
This is all in his hand. So we know the provenance, the origin of this memo. It's not something that a UFO buff cooked up. It's in a photograph that was taken by a photographer for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, J. Bond Johnson. We know the origin of this memo, and we can read the words, some of them, a good portion of them, and it's talking about the disc that was forwarded. It mentions the victims of the wreck. We know that if they had been military victims, they would have been called casualties, not victims. And weather balloons don't have victims unless one landed on your head, I guess, and smothered you. Yeah. I don't know, but
I'd love to know where this telex is now. Huh?
That's a good question, George. I have two possibilities on that. If Ramey didn't burn it, and who knows, maybe he did. But
maybe he did. Yeah.
We have had stories from neighbors of the Rameys that there's the proverbial trunk in his attic.
Oh, it still could be there.
Still could be there. If not, and we've never been to the Rameys' residence, but we've heard that story several times over of a trunk. Also, one involving a Blanchard, a trunk somewhere. Boy, wouldn't we like to, get a look at those? But
sure.
The other possibility is I talked to an author of a book on Pearl Harbor, and he spent 20 years in archives researching documents on regarding the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Spent 20 years. So I called him one time a few years ago. I explained about the telex, and I said, if it were you, where would you think that telex might wind up? What archive would that be in? And so he gave me a list of most probable to least probable, and I still have that list of where that telex, if it is archived, where it would be. So,
what a dramatic story that would be.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely. That telex to us, and I think Don agrees, is a smoking gun. That's what we call the smoking gun of Roswell. It's just, it can't be talking about anything other than the Roswell crash. That's the only thing that makes sense.
Are there any children from Ramey that are out there that could talk about this?
Well, yes, but he hasn't. And, in fact, the son of General Ramey went through the museum a few years ago.
In Roswell, yes.
In Roswell, yes. The UFO Museum in Roswell. And, Don, I think we are invited down, aren't we?
The door was left open, not directly invited, but that we should stay in touch, and we've yet to take him up on such an invitation, but we really should. We really should.
Why isn't he saying much?
Well, I think, first of all, the general to this day, serves as the Snidely Whiplash, the sinister element as far as behind the cover-up of the entire incident. General Ramey, he's the one who had the weather balloon press conference. He's the one who, essentially let the air out of the Roswell flying saucer, so to speak.
Sure.
And his family, as a result, just by that name, and anyone confronting them having any background, any knowledge of the subject, they have this black eye, so to speak.
They could make it good, though.
They certainly could, absolutely. And though true to form, like Ramey would go on, for example, he was often referred to as the Air Force saucer man. He was always the spokesperson. Interestingly enough, he would become a consultant to the Air Force Project Blue Book on the subject. And yet he was one of their chief debunkers. He went out of his way for years trying to explain away the subject. In fact, as far as we can determine, he was also the instrument behind the entire ridicule factor. Days after the press conference at Fort Worth, he was on an El Paso radio program, and he was asked if that explained Roswell. Fine, but what about all the other sightings throughout the country? He agreed, yes, there had been sightings in every state throughout the country at that time, except for Kansas, which was a dry state.
Interesting.
And that came from Ramey.
Yeah.
And we've all had that knee-jerk, we've had that indoctrination since that, people only over-imbibe see such things.
You two have done a great job with both the Witness books, Witness to Roswell, Unmasking the 60-Year Cover-Up, and then, of course, Witness to Roswell, the Unmasking the Government's Biggest Cover-Up, which came out last year. I want to take some time after the break to talk about both those books because they flow together perfectly.
Thank you, George.
Do you think we'll get the bottom line answer to Roswell? Is anybody ever going to come forward and just solve this for us? And I don't mean reporters like you two and investigators, but some government official?
Someone that is either a participant or a corollary in the same, in a place to know. My answer is no. I don't think that's going to happen. I think because as we stated before, the government is not ever going to come clean on this case. And whoever would think about that would also have to think about their career. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think what we're doing is we're putting this case together one witness at a time. Most of the information we get that's just in little snippets. We don't get that person that sort of knows the whole picture. That person hasn't appeared, and we don't think that person is going to appear. So we have to do it like we are. And the moment we get an incontrovertible piece of physical evidence, and we are looking hard for that, we will hold a press conference on that.
Super.
And
come on this program.
Absolutely.
We're going to be back in a moment. We'll have Tom and Don tie together their two works of Witness to Roswell. Back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. On our next Coast to Coast program, Linda Moulton Howe, our investigative reporter, joins us with a number of stories of high strangeness. And next hour, we'll take phone calls with Tom Carey and Don Schmidt as we are witnesses to Roswell. And we'll be back with both of them in a moment on Coast to Coast AM.